How do you know if it's time to find a new therapist for your teenager? Well, that's what we're talking about today on Tips on Teens. My name is Kent Toussaint. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in helping kids, teens, and families live happier lives. I lead two organizations, Teen Therapy Center and the nonprofit 501c3 organization, Child and Teen Counseling, both here in Woodland Hills, California. Every Wednesday at noon, I jump on to Facebook Live to answer your parenting questions. Let's jump into today's. My 14-year-old son has been in therapy now for 7 weeks, and we haven't seen any changes. When we started therapy, we thought that by this point, he would be seeing our point of view a little better, but he's still doing the same disrespectful behaviors and not doing his homework. It's hard for me to have any faith in this process when I don't even know what they're talking about too. How long should I wait before I try another therapist? Thank you for your question. I think it's an important question that all parents will ask from time to time when their child's in therapy. A few things to consider. Number one is the reason why your therapist can't say exactly what your child is saying in therapy is because it's important to protect his confidentiality, even if he's a minor. That is a right protected by California state law. And the reason that is if your teen's therapist goes and talks to you and says this is what's going on, and your son finds out, the process is done. He will never trust that therapist again, nor will he trust the next 5 therapists you try to send him to. He won't trust the process. We need to have a safe place for your son to honestly self-reflect and say the uncomfortable things that are in the back of his head that he's afraid to say. And once he can get that out, then he can work on them. And that's why he does have that confidentiality. But to consider whether it's time to move or not, a few things to consider. Number one, does your son like his therapist? Does your son feel safe with his therapist? Does your son feel connected to his therapist? If so, I think that carries weight because that's where the work happens. Once your son feels safe and secure and trusts his therapist, the therapist can take him places. The therapist can challenge him to look at things in a new way. You may see those changes. You may be the last person who sees the changes because you're the parent. But that may be happening. I don't know if it is, obviously, but it's possible. Another thing is, it's important that you have a relationship with this therapist. As I say, when I work with a kid, I work with a family. I work with the parents all the time. Now, what the child is saying stays confidential, again. But it's important that, I as a therapist have your perspective. If I was working with your family, I would want your perspective because you have a much broader view of what's going on. Your teenager may have very much tunnel vision of what's going on in his life, and you can see a much broader vision. So if I talk to you and get some feedback, and then Junior comes in to see me and says, "Hey, I talked to your mom. Sounds like you had a big fight." "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that." Okay, so now we can talk about it because sometimes kids aren't focused on what you want them to focus on, and it helps the therapist have a broader view. Also, you should feel heard by your child's therapist. Your perspective is important. And also, is it time for possibly a family session just to reconnect and see how things are going? I think those are important as well. But in judging how long therapy should go, it really depends because every family's on their own time clock. Everyone's on their own schedule. Everyone's on their own path. So you can't really say it's going to be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever that is. But what I generally recommend is judging therapy in 3-month chunks. And the reason for that is you're trying to judge therapy week to week. It's like watching a garden grow. It's going to drive you nuts. Because you can go in your backyard, get all your garden boxes, get your organic soil and your compost and your fertilizer, and you plant your seeds and you water them, and you come out the next day and you still have boxes of dirt. The next week, you still have boxes of dirt. A month from then, you still have boxes of dirt. It takes about 3 months for you really the tomatoes start blooming and the sunflowers to really pop open. And then the carrots, the carrots aren't really growing the way they should. We need to put a little more attention on the carrots. We need to keep the tomatoes growing and the sunflowers growing, and somehow we need to put a little more attention on the carrots. And that's kind of like therapy. If you judge it day to day, week to week, it's going to drive you nuts. So it's kind of like an investment in long term. And how you decide if that investment is going well is your relationship with the therapist, your son's relationship with the therapist, and just some time. If you feel it's not working, I encourage you to talk to your son's therapist about why it's not working. See if he or she can address your concerns in a way that is satisfying for you. And if not, ask that therapist for referrals, or ask other people for referrals. And anytime you're talking to a therapist, if that's not working, they should be able to give you some other qualified referrals that they know and trust. And again, in LA, there's no shortage of therapists in this town. There's plenty of therapists. If you're in another city or state, I'm sure there's a lot of therapists there too. Anyways, that's how I would approach this. It's a tough question, and thank you for your question. Again, my name is Kent Toussaint with Teen Therapy Center and Child and Teen Counseling. If you have a question you'd like me to answer here on Tips on Teens on Wednesdays at noon on Facebook Live, email us at tipsonteens@teentherapycenter.com or direct message us right here on Instagram or Facebook. We love your questions. Thank you so much. I will see you next Wednesday. Have a great week. Bye-bye.